Tonight I am going to be talking about the book Mountain Dharma, Karma Chagme's Mountain Dharma as taught by Khenpo Karta Rinpoche, Volume 1, and I am on the chapter that is titled The River of Ambrosia That Purifies Obscurations, Vajrasattva Practice. So that's what I'm going to be talking about. And interestingly enough, the chapter starts out talking about anger and enemies. And the reason why I point that out is it seems very appropriate in the United States tonight to be talking about anger and enemies, as it is the second day of the Democratic Convention in Chicago. I'm not picking sides. I'm just saying that there's a lot of anger involved in politics in this country at the present time, and a lot of enemies, real and imagined. It says that we are constantly thinking about trying to literally do in our enemies or outdo our enemies. If we have either of those concerns, we misunderstand Dharma, and that we realize the problem is really our own wrongdoing and our obscurations, that they are our true enemy. And it goes into explaining this in more detail. Very simply, the worst an enemy can do is kill you, and after that they lose their power. However, our negative karma, our negative habitual patterns that we create through our anger, goes with us from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. We can't get away from it by dying. There is a quote by Shanti Deva: "There is no evil like anger and no virtue like patience." So having enemies actually gives us an opportunity to practice patience, to develop our patience. And patience is extremely important. If we did not have enemies, we wouldn't be able to develop loving kindness and compassion. It's that simple. The interesting comparison is that anger is a bit like poison in terms of it causing so much suffering to the person that is angry. Pema Chodron has said, anger is like drinking rat poison and expecting the rat to die. That is not in the book, but I think it's an excellent quote. Now, the one good thing about bad karma is that it can be purified. And that's what this chapter is all about, is purification of karma, bad karma. And of course, we can accumulate bad karma through things besides anger. But regardless of the source of the negative karma, the bad karma, that it can be purified through confession. There is an example of Angula Mala, who had killed 999 people. Then he met the Buddha, and the Buddha subdued him and taught him confession. And as a result, he was able to purify all that karma of killing 999 people. His name comes from, well, it's mala, and then the other part of the name means finger, that he had made a mala, a necklace of fingers that he had cut off of his victims. There's a lot to this story. I'm not going to go into it anymore. The point that it was brought up here is that even someone that has done that much negativity can purify their karma. So there are four components of confession and purification. This is my own system to help remember it. I like to say the four R's, as in reliance, regret, resolution, remedy is number 3, and number 4 is resolution. So I'll go through these. The first power, the power of reliance, is having a witness for your confession. Now, this does not have to be an in-person witness. You can visualize or imagine the Buddha being present, or his mind being present. A statue of the Buddha could be present, a volume of Dharma, a stupa even. If you have any of these present, that would be something that you could rely on. You could visualize your guru. You could visualize Yawan Karmapa in front of you. If you wanted to, you could visualize all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and invite them to witness your confession. All of these are fine. The idea is that you're relying on someone else to hear your confession. So then the next power is the power of regret. And this means sincerely regretting unvirtuous actions. And here the metaphor is as intensely as you would regret having drunk poison. So have this sincere regret that you have done unvirtuous action or a series of unvirtuous actions. So that's a second important element. The third is the remedy. This is the mechanism of purification. It can be prostrations or a circumambulation of a stupa or other sacred site. It can be a verbal action, such as reciting scripture, liturgies, mantras. But the most powerful is the meditation on Vajrasattva, as is taught in ngondro, that this is considered the supreme form of purification. We'll go into this in more detail. Then the fourth is the power of resolution or resolve. And it's said here in the chapter, this is the one we have the most trouble with. What comes to my mind, it isn't mentioned here, but New Year's resolutions. Oh, I'm not going to drink alcohol this year. And a week later, you're at a party having a drink, and maybe even drunk, and so forth. That we have to make a strong commitment to never do this behavior again. And the problem is that these negative types of behavior are habit forming. And because it's a habit, you're just about guaranteed that you will do it again. So the only way you can really eventually end this kind of behavior is to keep doing the confession. The sooner you do a confession, the easier it is to purify the karma. Rinpoche made this example. He said that we're frequently in a position of young children that are constantly given clean clothes by their parents, and within 5 minutes, the clothes are dirty. The thing is that we have to really resolve and keep on top of this rather than just let it go. He mentions different patterns of problematic thinking. The first one is having arrogant thoughts about it. And that would be, quote, or thinking, quote, I can take care of this action of wrongdoing. I can handle it. It is not that important. It's not that big a deal. End quote. Or another thought would be, I'm clever enough or strong enough to withstand its effect. Now, another one here is another problem with this resolve is being proud of whatever it is that you did. This isn't a Tibetan word or a Buddhist word, but the word macho is brought up in here by the translator. So then Rinpoche talks a little bit about calm, and this is where Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche came from. This is where Trungpa Rinpoche came from. This is where frequently the Karmapas of the past have come from, where the present Karmapa has come from. And people from Kham are frequently looked upon by people from other parts of Tibet as being the equivalent of a hillbilly, maybe a mountain billy, and being pretty dumb. And Yeshe Gyamtso, the translator, once said that this is how Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's Tibetan accent, the way he pronounces Tibetan, would sound if you had a similar accent in English. And this is a direct quote from Yeshe Gyamtso. Shucks, y'all, let's talk about the Dharmakaya. And I'm not doing a good job as he did of this Southern accent. So the story that Rinpoche gives here is, and I think it's Rinpoche, I don't think it's Karma Chagme that gives this, about a man from Kham saying, quote, yeah, when he said that, I stabbed him immediately. Like, yeah, I had to do it. I had no choice. So this is a lack of commitment. This is this macho, well, this is, the way Kampas behave. Kampa is a man, a person, a male person from the area of Kam. And just, I've got to say this, I can't help it. I've had people that don't understand there's an area in Tibet called Kham, Kham, and they think that I'm talking about Kham as in .com. This is not .com we're talking about here. So the third is, well, the idea here is if you have this attitude, no matter how much you try to purify your wrongdoing, you'll not be successful. You just have the wrong attitude. And a third detour, I think that's a good word for this, would be to think that, well, I have to do these things because I'm living in the world. And it's not a perfect world, so I have to do these things. It's beyond my control. Well, of course, if you feel that way, then what is there to purify? What is there to resolve, to change? So going back to the problems here of negative behavior is A, it's habit forming. There's no guarantee that we'll be alive long enough to confess or to purify the wrongdoing, even if we do it properly. And this accumulates. Rinpoche talked about it, gathering interest, just like a bank account or a bank debt. And so even though you don't add to it, it increases just through the fact that it hasn't been dealt with yet or purified. And it might seem like it's almost impossible to escape from all of this. So I have here to sum up all of this about resolve is that if we don't have the resolve to keep us from repeating these non-virtuous or unvirtuous actions, we'll not be able to purify it, even if we've admitted and confessed it. So that is the introduction to purification through the Vajrasattva practice. Now, since this is about Vajrasattva, that is the 100-syllable mantra that we have in the second part of ngondro. Now, if you are in retreat and you're doing something else as your main practice, then you would recite this 100-syllable mantra every day between sessions, your main sessions of the practice. And do it, the mantra, at least 21 times. This number is something that is found in various tantras, so it's not an arbitrary number. Here again is another story that was in here, and this is about a man who killed 18 people and 18 horses. And he had such regret and such faith that he said one Mani mantra, and it was purified, and he was reborn in Dewa Chen. This is an extreme example. And of course, Rinpoche says it all depends on our degree of faith. But don't expect one Mani to purify it. He says that the usual number for it to be effective, that is the Vajrasattva mantra, is 100,000. That is what is used in ngondro practice, 100,000. But then he ups the ante, and I believe this is Karma Chagme who does this. So the chapter continues that we live in an age of degeneration, and as a result of that, 4 times 100,000 is much better and more effective, which would be 400,000 repetitions. And it would be best to do it in a formal meditation session rather than between formal meditation sessions. And the chapter stresses that faith is extremely important here. This brings up a story about a kampa. It's not in the book, but it's about faith. So not only are kampas hillbillies, but they're dumb hillbillies, according to, you might say, Tibetan, overall Tibetan feelings, attitudes. So this one kampa, he heard that there was this great teacher, as they used to do, would travel with a retinue. They would set up an encampment, put up tents, and then they would do teachings and pujas and so forth for a while in this area, and then take down everything and move on to another area. So this Kampa heard about this great teacher that had come, and he decided that he was going to go and meet this teacher and receive teachings from him. And again, he wasn't all that bright. When he got there, the first tent that he went into happened to be the kitchen tent. And the people there said, "Oh, we could use help here in the kitchen. Please help us." So he agreed to help. And eventually, somebody said, this is maybe a week or two. "Oh, the Lama needs to be served. Would you like to serve him?" And the Kampa said, "Well, yeah, I'll do that." So he went to Rinpoche's tent. And a little bit of background here, this Kampa, he had a very large nose, very bulbous nose, and it was kind of pockmarked. Maybe you've seen Tibetans with noses like this. So the Kampa walked into the tent. The Lama, the Rinpoche, saw him and made an offhand comment that was, "You've got a nose like a potato." And the Kampa, when he was finished serving, left and felt that this was his special transmission. And so he eventually went home, had no more contact or teachings from the Rinpoche, but he went home and he took his mala and he kept going, "I've got a nose like a potato, I've got a nose like a potato, I've got a nose like a potato." And he had great faith that this was his special transmission. Well, people started coming to see him for healing when they were sick. And he developed a reputation as being a healer. Well, years later, the Rinpoche has come back to the area, and now he's got a cyst in his neck. And the story, which is a totally Tibetan story, the way it sounded to me is perhaps an infected tonsil. But anyway, a cyst inside his neck. And he's in quite a bit of pain and discomfort. So his attendant starts looking for Tibetan doctors and healers. Can't find any. So finally, this name of this Kampa comes up and they summon him. And so the Kampa shows up and he's got his mala and he's going, "I've got a nose like a potato, nose like a potato." And he walks into the Rinpoche's room, and the Rinpoche recognizes him and sees he's going, "I've got a nose like a potato." And he laughs so hard that the cyst bursts and he's healed. So that's a Tibetan story about faith. Now, where I left off was doing 400,000 Vajrasattva mantras, or 600,000 of the six-syllable Vajrasattva mantra, which is Om Benza Sato Hung. The long mantra is roughly 100 syllables in length. It is said that even the worst karma that we have accumulated, the karma that would cause us to be born in the lowest of the hells, the most painful of the hells, can be purified by doing Vajrasattva. If you have a clear visualization and you have the faith and confidence in it. So it is the supreme purification mantra. Now, it is brought up that this Vajrasattva mantra is usually done in the beginning of practices and any course of instruction, and this leaves me a little bit puzzled, because the practices that we do here at the Hay River Center, which are White Tara, the Jamgun Khandro, White Tara, Chenrezig, and Amitabha, the short Amitabha practice that they do at KTD in the evening at 7 o'clock, that these do not have Vajrasattva in them in the beginning. The White Tara has it after we finish the mantra repetition and even after we make the Dharma offering. But here it stresses the importance of doing purification before you really get into a practice, because then it makes the practice more effective. I'm not going to say anything more about it than that. But there's no question about it, if you would do purification before you do a practice, that it will make it more effective. In a way, it's like starting off a meal with a clean plate, rather than taking something that you ate on yesterday and then putting more food on it. Now, signs of being purified are very simple. It's easier to meditate. Concentration is stronger. You get distracted less. If you're doing deity practice, again, you can focus on the visualization better and so forth. So it's important to do these purification practices. Going back, this kind of reaffirms what was already been covered, and that is that the single most profound method for increasing our realization and our experience of sacredness is the Vajrasattva meditation. He goes on to say the reason why we don't see the nature of our mind as in Mahamudra practice is that our obscurations are keeping us from having this experience. This section ends with a quote by Karma Chagme. There is no point in my continuing to say the same thing in many other ways. In short, it is taught that you can attain full Buddhahood through this method alone. Therefore, Sundro Gyamso, practice it. and Sundro Gyamso is the man that is taking these notes of Karma Chagme's talk. And he is the one that requested Karma Chagme give these talks to him. So now we come to the actual instructions of the 100-syllable mantra. And it begins with homage to the Guru, inseparable from Vajrasattva. Now, the practice of Vajrasattva has many levels, and 5 are described here. I'm going to talk about one. I'm prepared to talk about the second one. We'll see if there's time to get into the second one. I'm not going to get into the third, fourth, and fifth for very simple reasons, and that is that they're pretty advanced, and I don't feel myself qualified to teach on them, and I don't think there are too many people that are going to be viewing this video that are qualified to hear these explanations, but they're in the book if you want to reread it and study it and so forth. So the levels are outer, inner, secret, very secret, and let's see, what is the 5th one? See, I can't even tell you all 5 of them without looking. Let's see, the Vajrasattva practice of suchness, or the nature. This is Mahamudra. So going back here to this section. The outer practice of Vajrasattva. And this outer practice is, again, the practice that is used in ngondro, the second practice after going for refuge and engendering bodhicitta. So we visualize ourselves in our ordinary form. Above your head, you imagine a white lotus flower with a moon disk on top of it. Then you visualize a white hung above that, and so on. I guess I could go through all this in more detail because it is in the book. Then from that hung, that seed syllable, light radiates to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And also it radiates to all sentient beings, purifying their negativity. It makes offerings to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The rays of light are then withdrawn back into the hung, and that brings blessings from the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And the hung is transformed into Vajrasattva. And he is brilliantly white, but when it says brilliantly white, he's made out of light, he's transparent. He's not white like a piece of paper or a snowball. He is more transparent. It says here, brilliantly white in color or the color of crystal. And the idea of the color of crystal being the crystal has a color, but you can see through it. It's transparent. And this means that he is insubstantial. He's translucent. You can see through him. You could read a book with him in between you and the book. This is an important point. It's easy to think that these visualizations are solid. So in his right hand, he holds a Vajra. In his left hand, he holds a bell. And the Vajra is held at his heart, and the bell is on his knee. And his right foot is slightly extended, a bit like green Tara. He's not sitting in Vajra posture, that the right foot is slightly extended. And of course, along with the foot is the right leg that's slightly extended. So the bell is on his left hip, and the bell is facing him. The handle is pointed away. The bell itself, the bowl of the bell, is facing him. Now you think that from his body, especially his heart, rays of light radiate outward. They make offerings again to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, invite them in the form of light to dissolve back into him. And at this point, Vajrasattva becoming inseparable with all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Technically, at first, when the Hung becomes Vajrasattva, that is the Samadhi Sattva. When it is then joined, this Samadhi Sattva is joined with the actual Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, it becomes a Samaya Sattva. It becomes the real thing, so to speak. It's not just a visualization, it's empowered and becomes the actual embodiment of all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So now, as you are repeating the mantra, you would imagine from the heart center, you have the seed syllable Hung, and around it, you have the 100-syllable mantra, and they start exuding amrita or nectar or dutsi in the form of white beads, which it's a bit like dew, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it accumulates inside his body, and then it starts flowing out his right toe. And this is above your head, and then it starts dripping or flowing into the top of your head and fills you up, because you're visualizing yourself as made out of light and as hollow, as having no internal organs. So there's plenty of room for all of this. Here in this chapter, it is described as a stream of wisdom ambrosia. So it flows through his toe into the top of your head, into you, it fills up your whole body, and it drives out all of your wrongdoing, your obscurations. It comes in the form of things like black tar, filth. It comes out of the soles of your feet, the pores of your skin, what's called the lower door. It just comes out from all of these places, and then it soaks into the ground below you. So this is just removing all this negative karma that has accumulated over the years. And if you want, you can just do the 6-syllable Vajrasattva mantra at this point. But keep doing mantra repetition as you are visualizing this. And do as much as you can in a particular session. And feel that this is actually working. Feel that this is emptying your body of all obscurations. So then at the end, imagine or visualize that your body has become like a vessel made out of crystal, and it's filled with this milk-like ambrosia, and that you are purified. Now, this does not mean that you think that your body is like a crystal, hard and brittle. No, it's not like that. You're just imagining that it has this transparent, translucent quality, this quality of insubstantiality. So then at the end of the session, you think that the Vajrasattva above your head says, quote, child of good family, and then your name, and says, your wrongdoing and obscurations have been purified. You don't have to say this out loud, just think that. So in my case, it would be child of good family. Lama Yeshe, your wrongdoing and obscurations have been purified. And having said that, then the Vajrasattva above your head melts into light and dissolves into you. Then at this point, in essence, you have become identical to Vajrasattva. You're not identical in terms of your appearance, but your essence has become identical to Vajrasattva. And then again, remind yourself that your obscurations have been removed and that you're no longer separate from him. As I said, your nature is identical. You're no longer separate from Vajrasattva. And then rest for a few moments in this feeling of inseparability. And look at the nature of your mind. This is a time for a little insight meditation. Look at the nature of your mind. So this is the outer Vajrasattva practice. Okay, to continue now, I am going to skip these other 4 practices and kind of sum things up. So I've discussed the outer practice of Vajrasattva. If this is done correctly, properly, with a required number of mantras, and you have a clear visualization that Rinpoche says there's no doubt all of your wrongdoing and contraventions of your commitments will be purified. And now here, commitments, this could be commitments of the Bodhisattva vow. It could be commitments that you have made with when you have had an empowerment, that there's usually commitment involved in an empowerment. So this can take care of any violation of your commitments. There, of course, are the 10 non-virtuous actions. So there's more things that can be violated. So here is a quote: by practicing in this way, you make your human life meaningful. And what this means is you are doing something that is meaningful, that will help you progress along the path to Buddhahood. It means that your practice is going well, that you might have all kinds of different experiences, or different people will have different experiences from what you have, but you are progressing along the path, even if it seems like other people are progressing more quickly than you are. It's good not to compare yourself with other people. So here are typical signs of accomplishment. That first of all, you feel physically well. You feel more vigorous, more tranquil, more at ease. Your mind seems more clear. Another would be feeling of renunciation, that you are beginning to see the futility of samsara and realizing that attachment to the pleasures of samsara is not beneficial. You develop greater faith and confidence in the three jewels and the desire to attain those qualities yourself. Sometimes you just might have a spontaneous experience of meditation stability, or maybe a glimpse of realization that you haven't had in the past. Some people might have dreams that indicate some progress, and so forth. In terms of dreams here, one possible dream would be dreaming that you're washing or putting on white, clean clothes. Dreaming that you're flying. I don't know if dreaming that you're flying in an airplane would be a sign here or not. Maybe it could be. Needless to say, there were not airplanes when Karma Chagme was dictating this book. So all of these are indication of purification. He goes on to say that not everybody experiencing purification will have pleasant experiences. He said that you could have unpleasant experiences that are an indication that you're purifying, that you could become more agitated. You could have external upheavals, and circumstances in your life might change in what you would consider for the worst. He says that it's natural to think when that happens that you're doing something wrong, but it doesn't necessarily mean that. It could be a good sign. What I would say is, if there's any question about it, talk to a lama about what your experience is and what you've been doing. Kind of sum things up. Rinpoche says that doing the Vajrasattva practice, it's like washing dirty clothes. The liquid that you're washing the clothes in gets very dirty, and it might look like things are getting worse. This is the nature of purification. You've got to get the dirt out of there. So you're going to get dirty water. But of course, the water then is discarded. And recognize that this is a result of purifying negative karma. You're not accumulating more negative karma, you're getting rid of it. It reminds me of a saying. I saw this on someone's desk one time, and it said, when you pray for rain, you've got to expect a little mud. So this concludes the chapter on Vajrasattva and a brief summation of the outer practice of Vajrasattva.